Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Mr. Ken Eastwood. Mr. Eastwood is a fellow and life member of CPA Australia, having held the positions of both WA State President and National President of CPA Australia. Having spent most of his professional life as an accountant in his own public practice, he has also owned and operated a group comprising 2 private acute surgical hospitals and 2 large private nursing homes. Before retiring in April 2000, Mr. Eastwood acted as Chief Executive Officer for 2 large Perth law practices for 12 years. He was appointed a member of the General Division of the Order of Australia in 1994 in recognition of his contribution to the accounting profession and for his services to the community. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ken Eastwood.
Thank you, Richard. The Metropolitan Local Government Review conducted by the panel led by Professor Alan Robinson contains some 30 recommendations regarding the amalgamation of Metropolitan Perth's 30 local councils to either 12 super councils, and that's option A, or 16 super councils, option B. It's important to note that neither the Robson report nor the Minister for Local Government has suggested that any savings will follow from these recommendations or that there will be any reduction in our rates. The only person to claim this is the Premier himself. The only example of amalgamation we have in the recent voluntary amalgamation of Geraldton and Greenock, as you heard. In that instance, rather than enjoying a reduction of rates, the rates increased by a massive 24%. There are suggestions in some quarters that fewer councils will result in savings. In fact, Professor Robson doesn't claim that or provide any evidence of cost savings. The report's recommendations 16 to 20 and recommendation 23 refer to the appointment of CEOs, mayors and councillors for the new structure and the setting of fees for councillors. Looking at the western suburbs, it might be assumed that what is proposed that is amalgamating 7 councils will save the salaries of 7 CEOs, each currently earning approximately $260,000 per annum, and reduce the number of councillors by around 70. Good possibility to save some money, you would think. The total saving in CEO salaries might be about $1.8 million a year, but what costs are we going to pick up along the way? Well, for a start, some or all of these CEOs will need to receive redundancy payments, as presumably will other senior staff if efficiencies are to be achieved. But then we'll have a much larger council of 80,000 ratepayers to service, so a higher calibre of CEO and support staff will be needed. The CEO alone for this much larger enterprise, including his deputies and a higher level of support staff, might well attract salaries and allowances in total around $500,000 per annum. The salaries of the deputies and support staff will need to be commensurably higher. Fees and allowances for elected members will be set by the Salaries and Allowances Tribunal. Based on Eastern States models, the 9 councillors elected to this new super council will have to be paid approximately $150,000 a year, in my opinion. They were in fact paid $120,000 a year 3 years ago when this all happened on the East Coast. So already we're up to nearly $2 million per annum to offset the saving of $1.8 million for dispensing with 7 CEOs. And we haven't yet accounted for the costs of housing this bigger council with all its additional staff, nor joining the assets, nor dealing with the individual council liabilities. Remember, under the current system, our councillors virtually work for their communities for no reward at all, save for reimbursement of out-of-pocket expenses. Now, under the proposed regime, each councillor will have to represent 9,000 plus ratepayers, not the current 1,500. This can no longer be seen as a local government. Perhaps a new description is also in the offering. Paying these elected representatives, the mayor and councillor, substantial fees introduces a whole new concept of expenditure in local government. These services, as I said, were previously provided gratis by the councillors and the ratepayers. The introduction of these new costs must impact on the cost structure of local government for all West Australians in a manner which is unacceptable to us all. The Robson report recommends that party politics be introduced into the system along with compulsory voting. Don't we have enough hassles managing our party politicians as it is, without introducing a third tier of party politics? Do we need and can we afford a third tier of government in Western Australia? Attempts to introduce a third level of government in Western Australian politics would, in my view, be soundly rejected by the West Australian community. That is, if they are allowed to vote on the issue, which of course Premier Barnett says they won't be, because he said he will force this through by Act of Parliament. Bringing party politics into local government will reduce the standing of our councils, marginalise our communities and do nothing to enhance the quality of governance in Western Australia. This is a further plank in the Premier's platform of centralising power. Councillors without ties to the traditional party groups are far better placed to act for the benefit of their local constituency. Imagine the levels of party funding that will pour into local government election campaigns. What chance will well-intentioned, independent, community-based candidates have up against the party political machines? What will be the cost to our community of mounting such a third round of party political campaigns? Recommendations 4, 14 and 29 of the Robson report refer to the scrapping of the present long-established coordinating body, the West Australian Local Government Association, or WALGA. This body, which all councils have dealt with for many years, is to be replaced with a new commission. What will be the responsibility and functions of the new body? To whom will it report? And what will it cost to wind up the existing WALGA, pay out redundant staff and find new staff and officers? Certainly Robson report doesn't tell us. And how much will this new entity cost to run? Who knows? Nobody has considered those questions. This is another of the Robson recommendations we're being asked to accept on blind faith. Recommendation 11 deals with the winding up of existing regional local governments. Once again, one might ask, at what cost? Recommendation 12 of the Robson report is transferring oversight responsibility for developments at Perth's airports, major hospitals and universities to the Metropolitan Redevelopment Authority, as you heard Mayor Norris mention. It is not at all clear how such a regime could apply to airports, for example, as these are owned by the federal government. However, airports, hospitals and universities require infrastructure and services such as access roads, footpaths, rubbish removal and building and planning services, which all cost. Under the existing regime, none of these instrumentalities are ratepayers. Under the Robson proposals, not only will these entities continue to not pay rates, but they'll be able to do as they please without having to fit in with their local communities and without reference to their local councils. Consider, from that scenario, the parking chaos, for instance, around QE2 Medical Centre as a consequence, or the rezoning and development implications of UWA's vision of a university city. Recommendation 15A of the report proposes to extend the Super Council's boundaries to the middle of the Canning and Swan Rivers. This will thrust a whole new set of responsibilities and costs onto some local governments, including here in the Western Suburbs. Responsibility for the health and welfare of the Swan and Canning Rivers should continue to be the responsibility of the state government, particularly as approximately only 40% of suggested new local government areas would be expected to bear the additional costs of maintaining these river systems. The remaining 60% are nowhere near the river systems. Recommendation 22 of the report suggests that a full review of current legislation be conducted to address the issue of property franchise and the most appropriate voting system. The panel considers that first past the post is inappropriate for the larger districts that it is recommended. Well, first past the post voting decisions are contrary to the provisions applicable to both the federal and state elections. Why would local government elections apply different criteria for assessment of a majority decision than is the case for state and federal elections? That could only lead to widespread confusion amongst the voting public. Recommendation 26 of the report provides that if the decision is reached to proceed with structural reforms, the process of implementation should begin without delay. If these wide and very far-reaching recommendations are to be introduced, then they should be clearly spelled out to the community before the next state election, together with a full cost-benefit analysis. And before proceeding with these radical and far-reaching proposals, there must be informed debate and a clear mandate from the WA community. To defer all this until after the state election will be an act of deception that the people of Western Australia will never forgive. The final recommendation of the report, recommendation 30, suggests that the panel's recommendations should be considered as a complete reform package and be implemented in their entirety. Robson makes 30 separate recommendations, some of which may appear reasonable, whilst others have far-reaching consequences and uncertain outcomes. To suggest an all-or-nothing approach without holding a public plebiscite on the matter is an unreasonable and high-handed approach. As a former National President of CPA Australia, I'm well versed in the regime of costs and cost benefits. I would have liked to be able to stand up here and tell you what these are in the Robson report. However, as I've explained, there is simply no financial data in this report, and there is no way of calculating costs, savings and efficiencies without a much more intense examination of the effect of each of the recommendations within the report. No one, Premier Barnett, Minister Castrilli or Professor Robson included, has yet spelled out these details or told us where these much vaunted savings are coming from. Not only is there no cost data included in the panel report, but neither is there any attempt to measure the impact of proposed changes against what we have now. Interesting to note that this push to convince all of us that bigger is better and more efficient, we now know that the only West Australian councils to be investigated for inefficiencies and corruption are our three largest councils, being Joondalup, Stirling and now Canning. If amalgamated councils are so efficient and cost-effective, why are those who have been through the exercise on the East Coast at a cost of nearly $200 million now scrambling to de-amalgamate? And why leave the final answer on amalgamation until after the March 2013 election? The first of the three great untruths is being thrust upon us. Mate, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help you.